Great. Thanks so much. So good afternoon and welcome. So today, OCFS Native American Services and OCFS's Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility is so pleased to present our webinar for Native American Heritage Month. Today's webinar is on positive Indian parenting, and we are joined by our special guest, Patty Fisher of the Tuscarora Nation. My name is Angelica Kang. I use she, her, they, them pronouns, and I'm the Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Officer here at OCFS. I'm joined by my team here at ODEIA and Director of Native American Services, Heather LaForme Maldonado. Before turning it over to Heather, I just want to highlight a few of the amazing things the Bureau of Native American Services does here at OCFS. While the Bureau of Native American Services is based out of CWCS, NAS is dedicated to strengthening practices through partnerships and education throughout all of OCFS. So you'll see Heather and her team pop up in every corner of our agency. She supports so much of what we do. And in the past few years, 70 families that identify as American Indian have been served by the Bureau of Native American Services here in New York State. So with that, thank you so much to Heather and everything that she does for us, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Angelica, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend our webinar today. So I'm going to go right into introducing Patty. So Patty Fisher has been a dedicated member of the Tuscarora Nation and is a member of the Beaver Clan family. With a deep commitment to her community. She began her professional journey in the U.S. Air Force as an avionics communication technician, gaining extensive experience across domestic and international assignments. Following her military service, Patty earned a Bachelor's of Science in Elementary Education from the University of Central Oklahoma and returned to the Tuscarora Nation to contribute as an educator at Tuscarora Elementary School. With a passion for community health and environmental sustainability, Patty transitioned into roles that allowed her to blend cultural knowledge with public service. She served as the Indigenous Whole Health Initiative Coordinator, working throughout the Haudenosaunee territories to strengthen connections between traditional practices, environmental stewardship, and wellness. Patty later joined the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force through the Tuscarora Environmental Program, where she managed key initiatives, including a community-supported agricultural program, a grassland restoration project, and the development of the Haudenosaunee environmental education curriculum. Her efforts integrated traditional ecological knowledge with Western science, helping to shape culturally relevant environmental education. Patty's commitment to holistic well-being extended into the health sector, where she worked with the Tuscarora Community Health Workers Program. That is where I know her from and have worked closely with her. In this role, she supported prenatal care, early childhood development, and parenting education. Patty co-developed an adaptation of the National Indian Child Welfare Association's Positive Indian Parenting Program, tailoring it to reflect Haudenosaunee cultural values while incorporating contemporary parenting practices. This initiative empowered families to foster well-rounded, culturally connected children. Now retired from the Community Health Workers Program, Patty is enrolled in the Tuscarora Language Immersion Program to further her proficiency in her native language. Her goal is to preserve and promote cultural knowledge while supporting traditional practices within her community. An active and engaged member of the Tuscarora Nation, Patty enjoys spending time with her family and expresses her creativity through sewing and beading. So please welcome Patty.
Anya, Heather. I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to go ahead and start with my screen share because it has everything that I want to talk about today. And so to start off with, I'm just so glad that you all are here to get this training and giving me this opportunity to share what I know about just being Tuscarora and Haudenosaunee and what we do out at Tuscarora for providing our positive Indigenous parenting. On the front screen here is a picture of our baskets of beginnings for our new babies that we provide. And the books you see there all have been translated into the Tuscarora language. All of the items that are in the books, are in the baskets, excuse me, are handmade. So the picture frame, the dolls, the bibs, sometimes we provide blankets. Those are all given to the parents as well. And the books, they receive a flash drive. This year they tried something new where they have the ID where you can just take a picture of it and it'll link you to a website that has all the different stories in there. So when we begin, anytime we begin any kind of gathering, we have our greetings and introductions. So my introduction is Twent Yatnarut to Desagwas. Yadatnareti Yafe Uke Patty Fisher Creudet Yafe Skarudet Digawaf Digagaf Nutne Disned Junicat Gisaset Disne Nutjis He Diwaknane Magachet Di Hanet Ganet Disne Magachet Di Hanet Sanet. So my name is Patty Fisher. I'm Tuscarora Beaver. I live on the Tuscarora Nation. I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm happy that you are here with me. The next thing we do is to bring our minds together is we do our Hakanahara Tetra, which is our Thanksgiving address. So I've gone through and I've provided, I always feel like there's visuals help it a lot. So there's English and a picture provided as I do the Hakanahara Tetra in our Tuscarora language. Una wagahef gaguri wagaya agihra yanike uriwe. Una hesne I equeti twen yegwa wadawe tentna ine agatweni. Esquat digere gafne venike digo wadake. Una gyawe yegwa de arutre disne netna nina herates disne twen Equagay hatne, hanet ne yuhnek hat nyetwat digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne, ne yakina harates, yagwa ufne, hanet ne yuhnek hat nyetwat digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne, ne yakina harates, twent hat awa gay hatne, aufne. Afnakya, awe awete, hanet ne yuhnek hat nyakwa digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne, ne yakinaharates twent have gecha gay hatne, u awakef. Hanet ne yuhnek hat nyakwa digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne, ne yakinaharates, Twent had uhye gay hatne. Wagayet naraku hat wise agatachi. Hanet ne yuhnek hat nyakwat digarutne. Une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne ne yikina harates twent hat utwahege hatne. Wagayet naraku hat nekwat tet. Gawe agadachi. Hanet ne hat gana hagehrad ujihe. Uthahere dis negachetwath. Hanet ne yuhnek hat nyekwadi kwat digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne, ne yikinarates twent hat unikwat gehatne. Hanet ne yuhnek hat nyekwat digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne, ne yikinarates Twent hat gadi gay hatne, wagayet naraku aqua agadachi. Hanet ne yuhnek hat nyekwat digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne ne yakina harates twent hat ure ege hatne, wagayet naraku ha ukji kette agadachi. Hanet ne yuhnek hat nyekwat digarutne, une jakwat digehrad. Una hesne twent got digehrad et noas disne, me kinaharates twant hat jeet na gay hat ne, wagayet naraku hat stakuya agadachi, hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una hesne twant gat digerad etwas disne ne kinaharates hitak digaru rakye. Hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una hesne twant gat digerad etwas disne ne kinaharates yogariasu hanet hitne gehaka. Hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una hesne twant gat digerad etwas disne ne kinaharates yogariachi hite. Hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una hesne twant gat digerad etwas disne ne kinaharates yogwasut asenyeha. Hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una hesne twant gat digerad etwas disne ne kinaharates twant hat yutnid sererawe ure yakef. Hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una hesne twant gat digerad etwas disne ne kinaharates hitak digaye gekostakye gaye yakye rutne. Hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una hesne twant gat digerad etwas disne ne kinaharates hat rawet diatne ti tariawake. Hanet ne yukne hat nyakwat digarut ne, une jakwat digerad. Una yegwa dihue get yegwa wedath neshu. Une ha twant dawite yegwat nehak gwis ariagwarihek ariagwat digerehnek. Ta'awite are hanet twat gaies thweru ethwehre ha ganahera tetre. Hanet ne yuknek yegwat digerakef, une jakwat digerad. So now our minds are one. And that is what we said at the end of each thing. And it's bringing our minds all together so that we can focus on what our words are and what the matters are that we're going to be talking about today. So the first question is, how does the Tuscarora Nation work with the families? So as a sovereign nation, we're governed by our Council of Chiefs and Clan Mothers. And we have 7 clans within the Tuscarora Nation. So each of the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy have a different number of clans, and those were all predetermined by our peacemaker when he came and brought the peace and the great word to all of our people so that we could come together and govern ourselves. So each clan is not ruled, but governed by a clan mother, and the clan mother is actually decided on by the people. And so the clans will get together. So if we have a death in the community and it's a clan mother, so the clans will get together and they'll talk amongst each other. And it's usually the women, because the women are the ones who decide who is going to be their clan mother. And they choose who their clan mother is. So each clan has a clan mother. So even the mother and the father of our parents that we're helping, they both have their clan mothers. So if they have an issue, they would go to their clan mother. So then the clan mothers would get together, and they would either get together as just the clan mothers themselves to talk about it, or they would get together with the mother and the father, and they would talk about it and trying to work out some kind of a solution to their problems. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. So if it doesn't work, then the next thing they would do is the clan mothers would bring this matter to council. So now council becomes involved. So council is all of the clan mothers and all of the chiefs of all the clans. So each clan has a clan mother and a chief. So all of these people would come together, and that's our council, and that's what governs us as a nation. And they would bring this matter up, and they would talk about it, and they would see if there was some way that they could find a solution to the matter. And then in turn, once that happened, then the clan mother would go back to the member, their clan member, which would be the mother and the father, and they would hopefully have a solution. So then you ask, well, what happens if you have a native and a non-native parent? So because our system is a matrilineal system, and so all of the clans are determined through the mother. So if my mother was a beaver, therefore I'm a beaver. And if your mother is not native, then you don't have a clan. And so then it's a different situation. So the native mother or that goes to her clan mother, and she has a chief, and then in turn she goes to council. If for some reason that there's a solution can't be found, then they in turn will go to the court system, the US court system. If a native mother has a child with a non-native father, they can try and work with the non-native father through the clan system, or the non-native father, if they're having like paternity issues, or they just want to find out what's going on with their children because the mom's not letting them know what's going on, they in turn can go to the US court system right off the get-go. And if that happens, then now the nation is brought into the US court system. So a lot of times we try to work within our own council to try and solve our problems so that we don't get into the US court system, because then it becomes real time consuming and expensive, and it just gets more sticky because now you have the court system involved, and the court system's involved, and CPS becomes involved. And so if CPS is involved, then you have all these other agencies becoming involved with something that we're hoping that could have been resolved within our own nation. Oh, here we go. So if you have a native mother and the non-native father going to the court system, how's the nation involved? So the council can go to court with the mother as a representation to show that they're supporting them. And there's ways that we can still work within the court systems with our council. So they'll send the leadership with the mother to court, and or also write a letter of support for the mother saying, that the mother is a part of the Tuscarora Nation. This is how we do things. And that goes on from there. The nation, the court system, the nation will advocate for the child to stay with the native mother or the family. The nation will provide a qualified expert witness, and if a child goes with the father, then the nation will ask that the child continues to have exposure or time with the mother's culture so that it doesn't lose its cultural heritage. Let's see. So what should OCFS be aware of when working with the court system and counties to provide better supports for the nation and their members? So one of the things that we found was that Heather is our only native representation for Western New York, and then we have Veronica over in Long Island area. So I feel that 2 native representatives for OCFS is underrepresented, and if we wanted to have a better working relationship, I feel that one of the things we could do is to have more native people filling more positions in the OCFS program. Another thing is to provide our DSS CPS workers with ICWA training. We, as a nation, Tuscarora Nation has met with our Nagar County CPS workers, and we try to do it on an annual basis so that we can work up a relationship between the 2 programs, and that there's a better understanding. Because what happens if the workers are not trained on ICWA, then it becomes an on-the-job training, and as they're going along, and so sometimes things are missed, or where the representation for the child, the Native child, isn't being received. And there's also the idea of cultural sensitivity being given if the CPS worker has that ICWA training. Another thing is that we have our QEW. We have 3. So a QEW from the nation can be a clan mother, a chief, it can be a faith keeper, or it can be a respected member of the community. At this time, we have 3 trained NICWA QEWs that went for training a few years ago. And so we have those available. And excuse me, the QEWs can represent our own Tuscarora Nation, or we can also represent other nations. So, and the last thing was the biggest thing for me is that we have, if a parenting class is required as a menu item, we want our CPS workers and OCFS to be aware that we do have a parenting program in the Tuscarora Community Health Workers Program. And so this program is based on NICWA's positive Indian parenting model, and it was began in the 90s. And it was started so that Native families, or it was understood that Native families have like a unique way of living, and that in order to honor this, NICWA made this parenting program. And the beauty of it is that it's designed to allow Native communities the flexibilities to use their own cultural teachings, and they're also using accepted parenting practices. Those are also included in the parenting model. So let's see, we have traditional and cultural teachings in this program, and since the 90s we've been using this, and it's really become very unique to our Haudenosaunee culture. We could take this class to any of the Haudenosaunee nations and go ahead and teach parenting to there, because our Haudenosaunee nations are all like-minded in regards to our teachings and the way that we do things, our stories, and the only differences would be our language there, but they're all of the same descent, so that a lot of times when we're talking to other people in other Haudenosaunee communities or other nations, in their language, we can hear the similarities. And at one time, all of our people were able to talk to each other in all of the 6 different languages and understand each other. And it's kind of sad that we've lost that. One of the things that we lost it through was the residential schools. And the big thing there was to take the Indian child and put them through teachings of non-native and how not to be a native. So if they went in there speaking their language, they weren't allowed to speak their language. They wanted them to learn English. And if they were caught speaking something other than English, then they were punished. And if you look at any other, if you look up residential schools, you'll find there's a lot more information out there. And one of the things that, if you have any kind of documentaries that you see, you'll find that the people talking about going through it, how the memories they have of being severely punished and being put in isolation and being separated from their siblings, and anything and everything they could do that could be done to take away any of their identity. They weren't allowed to wear their hair in customary ways. They weren't allowed to wear any of their customary clothing, and they weren't allowed to even practice their customary ceremonies. And so they were trying to erase everything that was instilled in them as children. And so the schools felt that the younger that they could get these children, then the younger, the better that it was, the better chance of teaching them to be more non-native. And so that had a lot to do with the way that we parent now. And so that's one of the big things that we teach when we're teaching our parenting classes, how to regain our culture and traditions in a positive way so that we can be good parents, but also good Haudenosaunee parents. So when we have these teachings, they're blended with modern parenting skills, of course. So we begin each class with a traditional teaching, and then we're followed up by making that connection to a modern parenting skill. And we make sure that we do our own research so that we can understand fully what that skill is and present it in the best way. So parents are given the opportunity to discuss how they might use their skill with their families, and then we challenge them to go home and try that skill so that they can practice it. And then they come back the next week and they report on what worked and what didn't work, and if they tried anything different, or if we had any other ideas that would help them. And so a lot of times it really works, and it's really encouraging, and they feel good and we feel good because they come back and they're like, oh, there's a better way to do it, better than, for example, one of the things would be we used quiet voices all the time. We didn't raise our voices and we didn't yell. We try to say things in a positive manner versus a negative manner so that you feel good about yourself. And we try to show them how to keep things like non-personal so that you're separating what the request is that you want that child to do versus putting your feelings on them, so that trying to guilt them into doing it. And understanding those kind of teachings. Another teaching that has come up is how as human beings we're made with 90% water. And so the Japanese studies of the water showed that when the water was talked to in a friendly, encouraging, and loving voice, that it made these beautiful snowflakes, the ice crystals. Yet when it was talked to meanly or like loud music that like is a hard beat and didn't make sense, then that would show that the snowflakes would be misshapen and they just didn't look good. And so we're trying to make that connection of how if we're using our kind and gentle voices, then they in turn are receiving your whole body is receiving that. And so those are just one of the things that we talk about when we're doing our parenting skills. So by giving them our native teachings, it empowers them, because a lot of times that whole generation of generational trauma has happened in each family because someone at some point in time has gone to a residential school. So if you go to the residential school, research has shown us that not even residential schools itself, but that people in general or the parenting practices that we found out was if the parents are nurtured until they're like 6 years old, and then they're not nurtured anymore. So they go to these residential schools and they're not nurtured, like they're treated like a little adult, and they're forced to do all these things that are not nice or that are very strict. And so when they grow up and they go out and they have their own children, they're loving to their children until they're 6 years old. And then after 6 years old, they're like, oh, you should be able to take care of yourself. And then they forget how to be loving to them anymore. And it's not that they knew they were doing this, but it was what they had learned. And so that we talk about this with our parents, this generational, that starts out historical trauma, and then it turns into generational trauma because now each generation is like, oh, this is how my mom did it. This is how my dad did it. And that's how it affects their parenting today. So when we point out these cycles, then we're working on breaking that cycle of negative parenting practices. And every time we come up with a new lesson, we put that in there, and it's like, don't blame yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. This is your chance. This is your chance to sit there and break that cycle. And so throughout the course, we encourage these things, and we can really see the parents blossoming when they go home and they try these new practices, and they're more forgiving for themselves. They're forgiving to their own parents because they might have been mad at their parents and realize that, oh, they just did the best that they could. And so I was just doing the best that I could. And so now I can change that. I can become even a better parent, and I can do these different things to make my children strong, healthy, Tuscarora children or Native children, so that they know who they are and where they come from. Because a lot of times these things, because those cultures were held back and you were punished for learning them, then the parents felt that they should hold these things back from their children. So, for example, my grandparents spoke fluent Tuscarora. My grandfather spoke Mohawk, and they talked to each other all the time. My mom, because my grandmother and her mother both went to residential school, knew that they shouldn't be teaching their children the Tuscarora, and so they wouldn't talk to them in Tuscarora. They would only talk in front of them when they didn't want them to know what they were talking about. So right there, one generation, that language is lost. And so then I grew up and I didn't have any culture and I didn't have any language other than, counting to 10, saying hello, and I felt so deprived. So then our school, in 1970, we had a woman come in and she taught to the superintendent of our school district and talked him into teaching our kids the Tuscarora language. So that started the whole revitalization of our Tuscarora language. And with that, so in 1970, they were given, basic commands, basic words, basic phrases. And as the years have progressed, now that we've flourished, and I'm just so proud and happy that we have a full immersion program, which is what I'm in, and that we're getting that language back. And so each year, it's growing, and this is the fourth year that they've been doing it. But in the meantime, they've also had the Tuscarora language in the school from pre-K to sixth grade, which is what our Tuscarora school goes. But in the last 10 years, now the language has been accepted into the middle school and the high school. So now the language is going up to the high school, so that it's becoming, the students are becoming more proficient. And then the next step then is to have them go to this immersion program. And when they first started,
Okay, folks. Yep, I think Patty is frozen.
and
Oh, there we go. Back. So Patty, we lost you for a second. You got
oh,
frozen. You might have
no.
to so just
Where was I?
backtrack like a minute or two. I think we lost your audio around 12:30. I mean, yeah, it's like less than a minute.
Okay. So what was I talking about?
High school. Yep.
The high
Thank
school.
you.
Okay, so the language went up to the high school. And so then from the high school, they're hoping that they would some students would get into the immersion program so that they can continue it. And with the immersion program, the idea is to have the young parents that have children in the Tuscarora school students go to school, the parents go to immersion, they go home, and they continue to talk to each other in the language. So it's a beautiful thing. And I just feel happy to be a part of that program as well, because I also want my peers to see that, I'm a little bit older, and sometimes it's hard for us to learn things at this little bit older age, but I want them to see that it's not impossible. And I hope more people step up in the future classes so that they too can continue to revitalize our language. So once our parents, I went on a little tangent there, but once our parents recognize that they have the power to change, and they don't have to keep on being practicing those bad parenting skills, and that they can change and they can break that cycle. And so that continues on. So the last thing our parenting, that's not the last thing, but one other thing that I want to bring up about our parenting program is that it has coping skills and grounding techniques. And the first thing that we do is our hug and a head check. So you can see how we give thanks from the people all the way up to our creator. And we do that at the beginning of every class, and we give them the words so that they too can go home and begin to practice them. And it's like a grounding technique, because now it's bringing, the whole purpose is to bring our minds together as one so that we're all on the same page. And then another thing that we do is we just talk about, being a parent is stressful. And so we talk about different ways that you can cope. It's like, do you have a friend? Go to your friend, talk about it with your partner. Step back and just look at yourself. Something's got you upset, take a minute, take a breath. We count to 5. We talk about different things that you can do for yourself. We talk about things that we can give to their children as well to help them to get through a rough moment. And so it's just good. It's a good thing, and it helps us, it helps them, and it helps everyone so that we can just be better. And we also have a mental health counselor. We have, our clinic provides mental health services, and we have our counselor come in and do, a half-hour talk with parents when we're doing that part of the lessons. And she in turn goes through and talks about, different coping skills, and just reiterates and acknowledges that there are problems with parenting. There are stressors with parenting, and then it's okay. And it's okay to feel that way. She says, but she also offers her services, but she's such a down-to-earth person and so friendly that we're hoping to break the stigma of what counseling does. And so we want her to come in and talk to the parents so that they too can see that, oh, it's just a regular person. It's not some person who's going to be sitting behind the desk and judging them or anything. She's there to help them get through whatever their issues or problems are. And that's all she wants. And so that's what we're doing to help break that stigma. So, oh no, where's the rest of I lost my screen. Oops, there we go. Our last thing is our nation. We also have a longhouse where we practice our traditional ceremonies, and that further connects our parents to their cultural heritage if they are interested, and it helps to build their cultural identity as well. I just wanted to have you take a look really quick at what we're talking about when we do a parenting program. So this is our week 1. So after we do the opening and we do greetings, and the first week we just talk about ourselves, but the following week we go through and we talk about our homework, who tried this and how did it go? And it gives them, and it's just a nice little time to get together with each other and talk about what went well for them, and that if they liked it or didn't like it. And most of the time we always get positive feedback, and that they really do like the things that we offer them to take home. So on week 1 in traditional parenting, that's the first week we just talk about where we come from, who we are, and it's just to build that sense of our Indigenous parenting, and that we do have a unique history, and that we do have strengths that will help us as parents. And these are things that have been going on for a long time until this residential school hit, or other historical traumas that we've had happen to us as a people that have tried to break that cycle. And so we're just reminding them and just bringing it back to the forefront so that they remember who they are. So then these objectives come straight from the NICWA book, and we don't change them. We just, use them as our guides to help teach the lesson. So this is parenting is developing, I can't quite read that, who you want your child to be. So the next slide would be, as you can see, this is a picture of a Tuscarora family. It's an old log cabin, and they had agreed to have this picture taken, and they just, they're really cute. And so in in the 1700s, when the colonists were, coming across New York State and making their towns and everything, a lot of our Haudenosaunee people used to live in the longhouses, which is the bark houses that you may or may not have seen, when they're talking about longhouses. And so in the 1700s, they saw the towns and they saw how they had individual houses. And that was, I feel like that was like the beginning of the separation of the intergenerational families. And so they continued with in their homes like that, and they continued with the practices and everything, but I feel like that was like the first step that took apart our family, so that that first little tear in our cultural heritage. But anyway, we talk about the customs and our beliefs, and our biggest thing is that we always have to think about the future. We're always looking 7 generations ahead, so that we're always doing what we should be doing as a people to protect our mother, the earth, so that she's still here for our next 7 generations. And we always say that the earth belongs to the children, because that's who we're supposed to be taking care of it for. So then another question, the next question is, where did we learn to parent? So we talk about trauma. We give a definition of trauma, and then we talk about epigenetics. What is epigenetics? How does it affect us? And we realize that some of these things that have happened in our past are come into us. But the good news is that those can be taken out as well in our DNA sequence, but they can be taken out. So as we examine our test score history, we'll begin to identify our traumas, resiliencies, and strengths. So we do, this first one is really emotional. And so we have 2 of us usually teaching at the same time, so that if someone is they hit something that bothers or troublesome, then they can be taken to the side and, talk it through, so that they can come back into the class. And then again, it's like, where did you learn to parent? Now that you've got all that, where did you learn to parent? And then we talk about some positive and negative things, and then how we can break the cycle. So that was just a little run through. So we have there's 8 chapters for the family thing. And it talks about from lessons of the cradle board, as are nurturing our children, and lessons of storytelling and how we use stories to help teach lessons. We have lessons of Mother Nature, or we call it the natural world, and that's when we really look at the Hagana Haratetra, which is our opening, our Thanksgiving address, and how it relates to us as parents, and how, it's part of our daily life. We talk about choices in parenting, and then, and that's our last one. And then at the end, we have a culminating activity where we just, all sit down and have like a little graduation ceremony and talk about what we got the most out of, and what we plan to do with these skills that we've got. And, just a celebration of making it through the 9 weeks. So in closing, we have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'm open to taking them.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay. Hi, this is Sarah Relier from the Syracuse Regional Office. I just wondered if you could share maybe, and I did miss a couple minutes just because of a call and so forth, so I hope I didn't miss it, but could you just share some of what are the most stark differences between parenting, in the classes? Like if there's something that, it stands out more than others.
I feel that a lot of times our parents weren't raised from the after effects of the residential schools. They weren't raised emotionally. They weren't in a loving relationship. And so that has its effect on, because now they don't know how to be good parents. And one of the things that happened from that parenting is when the students were released, either they graduated or they were taken out of the residential schools, and they came back, and they came back to the communities. They came back to their communities who were still living the way they lived before that these students went to residential schools, and they didn't fit. And so they felt like they didn't fit. And so a lot of them would turn to self-medication, drugs and alcohol. And so if you're turning to drugs and alcohol, then you're forgetting, your own roles and responsibilities of being a good person, taking care of other people, being a part of your community. And so then the difference that happens there is that begins a cycle of, now these people, even though they're abusing or alcohol, or then it becomes a part of their life, and so they find other people to be with. And if this alcohol takes part of your life, then you're not being a good parent. You're not practicing good parenting skills, let me say it that way. And so you also have lost your cultural identity. So you're trying to be back in a community that has cultural identity, but you don't have that identity. And so you're lost again. And so it all plays like in that whole generational trauma. And I think that by not having that culture behind you, you don't know who you are. And so you're confused. And I think that that's one of the things that happened. Another thing is that we're confused as a people sometimes, or this is how I felt when I was in the 70s, is that we had to fit in. We had to fit in with the non-native community. And so because it's surrounding us, all of our Haudenosaunee territories are all surrounded by non-native communities. And, in this day and age, this is where you have to go for the most part, to go and get a job to earn your living so that you can support your family. And so now we're living in between these two worlds. And it's difficult sometimes, because then you're trying to understand and who you are, and it's lost. And so, regaining that knowledge and regaining that feeling or that self-empowerment, I think those are some of the things that, some of the contrasts that you would see. As far as we have our own ceremonies, we have, we feel like those are our ceremonies. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And that we shouldn't be sharing them, because a lot of times we're distrustful of the non-native community when it comes to them stealing our stuff. I don't know how else to say that. Like, they steal our artwork, they steal our ideas, they steal our government. The United States Constitution is developed after the Great Law of Peace. And so many things have been taken from us as a people that we're distrustful of the non-native community. And that's another thing there. Even though we live in separate houses, we do still have strong generational ties. And I think those are really important. And a lot of times we ask non-native people, is that your cousin? Do you know them? Are they your friends, or are they your family? And even though they know they're their family, they don't even know them, and so sometimes I find that sad. I mean, we do have some families that are like that too, but overall, we know who we're related to, and we get along with our families, and we have a lot of activities with them. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Patty. We have a question on the chat that asks, what would be an example of positive traditional Native approaches to parenting that might be different from a non-Native approach?
I think we put our culture and heritage first. And so that's important, find out who you are, know who you are as a person, put that first, before we even begin talking about parenting. We talk about who we are as a people, who you are as a person, what are your beliefs, and so that you can go ahead and carry those through and use that background knowledge to raise your child, so that they can continue to instill and incorporate those thoughts and ideas that have been around us for thousands of years, and it doesn't, we're finding out that it doesn't take long. We almost did lose our language as a people. And, we're very close to have lost our culture too, because they had to go underground in order to practice their cultural traditions until it was allowed to come back out in the open again. And so since then, since the 70s, there's been a resurgence of a lot of our people taking back our culture and traditions and practice them in our way. And so I think that's like the first thing. Another thing is that we try to be positive all the time. And maybe it was just a poor example, but we went through a parenting program and it was really very dry. It was all science and textbook, and this is what has been shown. And we read the book, whereas with our program, we try to incorporate more hands-on and just conversation, it's so important, conversation.
Thanks, Patty. Well, it sounds like, here, I'll put my video on so you're not talking to a void. So as a follow-up to that, it sounds like what it requires is a lot of slowing down in time to parent in this way. And so with that tension of modern society and distraction and urgency in time, what can you say to that? How do we balance that tension, or what is recommended for balancing that tension?
Well, what you said is, so a lot of our teachings say that we didn't make up our mind in a minute. We had to think about it overnight, and it's okay. So now I'll sit there, and if I don't have an answer right away, I'll sit there and say, let me think about this. And I just remember asking my aunt questions, and she'd sit there, well, let me think about this. And I thought she meant like for a couple minutes, but it would be like sometimes a week, 2 weeks. And she'd get back to me. She goes, I have an answer to your question, So it was just an example of how everyone really needs to take the time to, just think about it and instead of having a pat answer right off the get-go. We need to think about, what we're really, our intentions are, so that they're well thought out, and you can go ahead and you don't have to backtrack and say, oh, wait a minute. So
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind, lastly, this question, kind of a big one, but you had mentioned, and we know that there is a lot of mistrust between the tribal nations and the government for many, understandable reasons. So how can we, both as individual employees of OCFS and as a collective, as an organization, what can we begin to do to rebuild that trust between ourselves and the tribal communities?
Mm-hmm. Just, asking questions, seeking understanding, am I correct in thinking this? Always, pre-phrase the question so that, and being open-minded and listen, and I think that's important for everyone, is that we just need to listen to each other, and that, asking those questions. Is this, does this work in your traditional thoughts, or is this something that we need to be aware of? It's just, sometimes it's nothing, but sometimes it's something. Just ask questions.
Thank you. Heather, did you want to add anything to that? Or do you want to answer that question from your perspective?
No, I'm good. I think Patty covered it, but I'm just being mindful of time, and I know that we have to close before Patty signs off. So I want to leave a few minutes for that. And again, for those that came in after Patty opened the meeting, we do a traditional opening and we do a traditional closing, so that when we, they're just good wishes for us leaving, and ensuring that our intentions are well, and then that we have safe travels. So Patty.
So we call it the Hag and Hadar Tetre, which is meaning the little closing. So une potehna dia ganyu ne yakini harates une yakwa digera rawe etwa digera rarutre hes that digehrad aragek Twetke ne yakina harates twet ha rawet die gene ha ufne get na ere ha ure yake. Disne ne yakina harates hane gatige ragwas ne nahne yegwa de yarutre. Disne une yegwa yakia ruye ha hetak digare yegwastakye aria ke yene Yes, Gianu Yegwat di Heti Yegwat Nene, Disne Une Ekwat Gwani Enwas Neshu Ariagwat Dige Ragwasnek, Hane Ucha Diga wet ga Diga wet Dakya Une Hat Hetu. Yeah,
Now, Patty, and thank you
Mhm.
for this presentation today.
okay. You're welcome, and I hope that I was helpful.
Very much.
Mary, thank you so much.
You're
And thank you
welcome.
everybody for joining us.
All
Have a
right.
great rest of your day. Thank
You
you.
as well. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful presentation.